There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't speak in silence, it screams through the skin. It's the ache of not being seen, not being believed, not being real in the eyes of the world around you. That's where we find Arthur Fleck. A man sitting quietly at the edge of society, with a painted smile and eyes that beg for someone to look deeper. Not just glance, but really look. From the opening frames of Joker, you feel it. The weight. Arthur is not just struggling, he's dissolving. His laugh isn't joyful, it's a symptom. A disorder, a reminder that he can't even express his pain without being misunderstood. The city around him is just as sick, graffiti-covered, garbage-strewn, and emotionally vacant. Gotham isn't just the setting. It's a reflection of Arthur's internal landscape, chaotic, cold, and uncaring. He wants to bring joy to the world. That's what he tells his social worker. But it's not really joy he wants to give, it's connection. It's relevance. He wants to matter. When he dances in front of children, when he writes jokes in a notebook, when he watches Murray Franklin on TV, he's reaching out from the prison of his own invisibility, asking, "Do I exist to you?" But no one answers. Not his boss. Not the people on the subway. Not even his therapist, who's more interested in ticking boxes than hearing his voice. The message is clear: Arthur's suffering is not significant enough to matter. He doesn't have the right kind of pain. That rejection cuts deep, not just for him, but for anyone who's ever felt like they were screaming underwater. You start to realize that Arthur's breakdown isn't sudden. It's slow. It's cumulative. He isn't snapping, he's eroding. And then there's his mother. Penny Fleck, frail and delusional, clinging to fantasies about Thomas Wayne and a better life that never came. Arthur takes care of her not because he loves her, but because he's all she has, and she, he believes, is all he has. Their relationship is codependent, suffocating, and built on a foundation of lies. She calls him Happy, a nickname that now feels cruel, and when Arthur discovers the truth, that he was adopted, abused, and lied to, his entire identity crumbles. If your mother lies to you about who you are, where do you turn to find the truth? That's when the mask starts to become the man. The clown makeup is no longer just for work. It becomes armor. A new skin. The first time Arthur dances on the stairs after committing an act of violence, it isn't just for show. It's liberation. It's the death of Arthur and the birth of Joker. But here's the part that hurts: you don't celebrate with him, you grieve. Because this transformation isn't a rise, it's a collapse. Joker is not a hero. He's not even an anti-hero. He's a man whose pain has outgrown his capacity to contain it. His laughter is no longer involuntary, it's weaponized. His voice, once meek and quivering, becomes sharp and articulate. Violence becomes language. And it works. People listen. For the first time in his life, Arthur feels seen. But it comes at the cost of his humanity. We like to believe that monsters are born. That evil arrives with horns and red eyes and a snarling laugh. But the tragedy of Arthur Fleck is that he was none of those things. He was a man who wanted to be good. Who wanted to make people smile. Who wanted to belong. But the world taught him that kindness is weakness, that suffering is boring, and that you only matter when you make noise, a loud, bloody, unforgettable noise. And he listened. That's where the dark psychology of Arthur Fleck lives, not in the madness itself, but in the slow, grinding process of erasure. Of being ignored until you disappear, and then doing whatever it takes to be seen again, even if it means becoming someone else entirely. By the time Arthur fully steps into the persona of Joker, what's most chilling isn't his violence, it's how logical it starts to feel within the world he inhabits. Not justified. Not righteous. But understandable. That's the disturbing brilliance of Joker as a film. It traps us inside his psychology long enough that the line between sympathy and horror begins to blur. Arthur's descent doesn't feel like a twist. It feels like gravity. Everything about his life was weighted toward this outcome. The mental illness, the isolation, the poverty, the gaslighting, both personal and systemic. He wasn't just broken by his circumstances. He was sculpted by them. The fantasy of being loved and accepted, the imagined relationship with his neighbor Sophie, says everything. That entire storyline, revealed to be a delusion, isn't a cinematic trick. It's psychological defense. It shows the lengths to which Arthur's mind has to stretch just to feel something like intimacy, not love. Not connection. Just presence. Just being noticed. He doesn't crave affection. He craves acknowledgement. When that fantasy collapses, the final thread tethering him to a sense of reality snaps. The world he wanted so badly to belong to has officially rejected him. Not because he failed to reach it, but because it was never going to make space for someone like him in the first place. And yet, in becoming Joker, he finds something the world had withheld: attention. Not respect. Not warmth. But visibility. The riots, the chaos, the masks, all of it is a grotesque mirror. Society sees him now, not as a man, but as a symbol. And that's the deepest twist of all: he becomes powerful precisely because he's lost all connection to humanity. There's something terrifying in that transformation, not just for what it says about Arthur, but for what it reflects in us. Because when you watch Joker, you don't just see him. You see every person who's ever been pushed too far, every person who's suffered silently, every person who screamed into the void and heard nothing back. Arthur is what happens when the human need for belonging metastasizes into something deadly. But here's the hardest part to admit: many viewers found something strangely cathartic in Arthur's rebellion. Not in the violence itself, but in the sheer act of being heard. Of finally standing in the center of the stage, no longer invisible. The moment he tells Murray Franklin, "You get what you *****ing deserve," isn't about comedy or murder, it's about retribution for a lifetime of dismissal. And in a world where cruelty often hides behind smiles and suits, that moment hits like truth, however uncomfortable it may be. Still, the movie doesn't let you walk away feeling triumphant. It doesn't pretend Arthur's pain makes his choices noble. It just forces you to feel what he felt. And that's what lingers after the credits roll: not the makeup, not the dancing, but the hollow, aching recognition that you understood him a little too well. That's what dark psychology does. It doesn't just explain behavior, it implicates you in it. It invites you to ask, what would happen if you lost everything? Your job, your dignity, your family, your identity? What would happen if the world didn't just fail you, but erased you? Would you still hold on to your moral compass? Or would you do what Arthur did, let go? By the end of Joker, Arthur Fleck isn't really a person anymore. He's a vessel, emptied out, rewritten, and filled with the noise of a city that never listened until it bled. And that's what makes the story so disturbing. Because this isn't a supervillain origin story in the traditional sense. There's no mastermind, no grand plan. There's just a man who finally snapped because he was never given room to exist in peace. This isn't about excusing his violence. Arthur crosses a line that can't be defended. But to understand his descent is not to endorse it. It's to confront how fragile identity is when it's built on nothing but pain. He doesn't start out evil, he starts out invisible. And in a culture where being seen can feel like the only form of power, even destruction becomes a kind of performance. A twisted form of control. What's left inside Arthur by the end is hard to describe. Not rage, not joy. Just vacancy. The moment he dances on the police car as the city burns, it doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like detachment. He's not celebrating. He's finally free from needing to be anything at all. No more pretending. No more masks. Ironically, in putting on the Joker face, he takes off the last piece of his real self. The true darkness in his psychology isn't that he wants to hurt people. It's that he no longer knows how to connect to them. Empathy is a language he was never taught, and when you're never taught how to care for others, or even yourself, you become dangerous, not because you're evil, but because you're unmoored. Floating, anchorless, looking for meaning in the fire. That's what makes Arthur tragic. Not just what he did, but who he might have been. If someone had reached him. If someone had seen him before he snapped. If the system had cared, if his mother had protected him, if he'd been allowed to feel loved without having to hallucinate it. But the IFS don't matter in the end. Because life isn't built on potential, it's built on what we do with our pain, and what others do to help us carry it. Arthur never had that. And that absence, the absence of real connection, is what killed him long before the Joker was born. The real terror of Joker is this: the story doesn't live in some distant, fictional Gotham. It lives here. In the cities we walk through. In the people we overlook. In the broken systems that offer pills but no care, confinement but no support. And if Arthur's spiral into madness teaches us anything, it's that neglect can be just as violent as a bullet. It's just slower, quieter, harder to notice, until it's too late. But here's where the story leaves us, uneasy, disturbed, but maybe more awake. More willing to ask real questions. Not about villains, but about the people we pass by every day. The ones who laugh too loud, or not at all. The ones who talk to themselves on the train. The ones who seem like they're fading right in front of us. Because Arthur Fleck didn't become Joker overnight. He unraveled in silence. In plain sight. And the scariest thing? We all watched. We just didn't see.